Hey guys, what's going on? I hope you're well. I hope you're enjoying the content. If you are, please like, subscribe, share it around, all that fun stuff. Click the links in the description, subscribe to my newsletter, everything like that to keep on top of what I'm doing, who I want to bring to you next. And please let me know who you want me to talk to. If you find someone that's really inspiring and I might not know who they are, I'd love to bring them on and have a great conversation with them. Our guest today is an interesting, more than interesting man. He started his essentially, I guess, his career in sacred geometry, sculpting, and geometrical form work at age 60, which I think is fantastic. And what he stumbled across was what we potentially need to reconceptualize our understanding of the heart. So I am really excited to bring this information to you, this conversation, because I think it's fantastic. I think what he has done in terms of using his artistic mind and his childlike love for creativity and innovation and inspiration, intuition, all those different things is something we really need nowadays to figure out why we're here, what we're doing, make sense of this world around us, all of that stuff. So I was hugely inspired speaking to this man. I hope you guys will be too. Without any further ado, let's bring in our guest. All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Dig Within. I am Rob Edward, and today I have artist, sculptor, and geometrician who has taught art for more than 30 years in high schools and colleges. And since encountering the work of Rudolf Steiner, Frank has been exploring the relation between form and spirit. At the ripe age of 60, he began to explore sacred geometry, and this led him to take up research concerning the number 7. And in the year 2000, he discovered a new geometric form never seen before. This geometric form, the Chestahedron, demonstrates a remarkable correlation to the form and functioning of the human heart. The man himself, inventor of this new geometrical form, Frank Chester. How are you today, sir?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you. Nice introduction.
Well, I can't thank you enough for your time. I've been, like I was saying before we recorded here, I've been quietly admiring your work for a few years now with my studies into the quadrivium and sacred geometry. And I'm really excited to share you with my audience because I believe what you've kind of discovered here is pretty groundbreaking in terms of what we know about the world around us, and especially the main pump of well, I don't even know if it's a pump anymore, centered within our body and how that relates to what you have found. And I can't thank you enough for what you've done and taking the time here today.
Sure. Yeah, I'm glad to help in any way I can to explain what I've found.
So maybe we can just dive right into people who don't know what is sacred geometry, and then why did that interest you, especially at the age that you kind of stumbled upon it?
Yeah, sacred geometry, the reason it's sacred, or why they call it sacred, is because it's geometry without measurements. So everything that's discovered, okay, has nothing to do with dividing things up into pieces. It's sort of a holistic way of looking at form and what form does. So it has been around for thousands of years. It's the first time a person took a stick and drug it through the sand and made a line. That's when geometry started. That's sacred. And also the reason it's sacred is because they only need 3 tools. All you need is a straight edge with no measurements, with no dividings, no inches or whatever. And you need a pencil and you need a compass. And those 3 things, you can make the most sacred and the most unbelievable discoveries in the world just with those 3 instruments. And those 3 instruments any child can have, or an adult or whatever, including me. And that's all I have. I have a straight edge, a compass, and a pencil.
And what was your did you have a background in geometry or anything like that beforehand? And was it something specific that interested you in studying this, or was it just that fascination of what you just described?
Well, no, I had no background in sacred geometry at all until I was 60. I'm I have a degree in art, and I've taught art for so many years. So basically, I don't have a science background. I have an artistic background. So what I discovered, I have to say, it was basically an artistic discovery that I took it into geometry and math. So what happened, really, what happens when I retired at 60, I decided to go back to school. So I went to a school in Sacramento. It was called Rudolph Steiner College, which isn't there anymore. Um, and I took a course in science called Goethean science. And in that course, there was a woman who came in that talked about sacred geometry. Oh my gosh, I heard these 5 forms that there was supposed to be throughout history of man, and the different qualities that they had. I was so interested in it. And so the first thing I asked is is there a 7-sided form? And this woman says, no, there isn't. There's a, there's 4 and there's 6 and there's, 20 and so forth, but not 7. So I kind of wondered, well, why is that? And she says, well, we don't know. So I just decided one day that I would try to find out if I could find a 7-sided form, because it didn't seem like it was so crazy to not have it, because you have a cube, which is 6, and you have an octahedron, which is 8. So between 6 and 8, there's got to be a 7. So that's how I started. I started in my bedroom, and I took a piece of clay and 7 sticks, and I put the 7 sticks into the clay and tried to measure them so they're all the same distance apart, like a platonic solid. And and I connected all the sticks with paper triangles, and it turned out to be 10 sides. So 7 sticks makes 10 faces. Well, I want 7 sticks with 7 faces. So I knew I was in trouble.
Right. Yeah. And it's fascinating that you came at it from an artistic standpoint as opposed to a scientific one. And we're using the creative side of your brain more than the analytical side of your brain to essentially invent something or discover a form that's in nature, but no one has, uncovered that before.
That's right. They haven't. And I did start artistically. And the reason that the 7-sided form, one of the reasons it's never been discovered before, is because I found it artistically. The mathematicians, the math, that's not the way you find it. You can't find it using math. You can't find it using a computer. It's impossible. You can't. You have to find it in a different way. And the different way, which is the artistic way, is what's so important to me to share, because a lot more can be discovered if you just get away from measurements.
Right. That's fascinating too, that it's the artistic side, it's not scientific, and you don't even need measurements. So it's really anyone can do this and just, exercise their creativity and stumble across these things.
Absolutely. You're free. You don't have to be tied down to a bunch of rules. You can use the rules, but not at first. At first, they're a hindrance, but not after you discover something. Then comes the math, then comes the rules, then so forth and so on can be used traditionally, but not first. The first part, no, that's why it's never been here before. Can you imagine this simple form? It has 7 points and 7 faces and 12 edges. Now, what could be simpler?
Right. So okay, so you stumble across this, and then what was it that really started to be it's groundbreaking that you're able to essentially discover something that is this. We're talking about the platonic solids here, which is essentially the same number of distances. Maybe you can describe this a bit better than I can, but what are the platonic solids? Why are they so important in terms of how we operate here in this construct that we're living in? And then finding a new one, such as you've done, what did that kind of mean? And what did that feel like when you kind of stumbled across that?
Well, it's unbelievable. Let's see, the platonic forms, they have a number of qualities to them. And one of the qualities that they have is that all the faces have equal surface areas. Okay. Another quality of the Platonic form is all of the faces are the same shape. Okay, so the Chestahedron is not a Platonic form because it has two shapes, two different shapes, which are called polygons, whereas the Platonic forms have only one polygon that goes around and they all touch. So the Platonic forms have been used for who knows how long, but Plato is the one who made them popular, and because that's all he did. He just studied those, and then Kepler took over. Lots of people took over and found out that these forms are the building blocks of the universe. So much is dependent upon these five forms. And that is fascinated me to no end. And so anybody who wants to study form and you want to look at the Platonic forms, oh boy, they're so rich. I encourage it.
And they're related to the elements, or I suppose the ancient elements of air, earth, water, fire, and then ether. Is that correct? And yours potentially would be related to, well, not potentially, but the heart itself.
Yeah, you're correct. The elements or the kingdoms, okay, are associated with these five forms that you just mentioned: earth, water, air, and fire. And the other one, which is questionable, we don't really, we're kind of sure. But they do have these qualities of earth, water, air, and fire. And it's just, it's a great connection because I used earth, water, air, and fire in such a way that helped me with the seven. And that's how I found basically that it possibly might be an organ, was because I put it through this process. Because when I found it, I wanted to know where it was in the earth, because or in life, where is it? And of course, no one knew, and of course, either did I. So I started first. I thought it was a crystal. So I studied crystals, and I found out that it wasn't a crystal because a crystal moves its form, its shape back and forth, whereas the Chestahedron was developed from a spiral. So crystals aren't associated with spirals necessarily. So I went to plants. The next thing I tried to find it in the plants, and the closest I got to the Chestahedron in the plant world was a rosebud. But I studied the path curves of the rosebud and the Chestahedron, and that didn't work. So the next thing I had to go to, so I went from earth and I went to water, which is the plants. And then the next thing I went to is the air. Well, one of the things about air that's interesting is that air represents turning things inside out. So that really helped me because I turned the seven-sided form inside out and came up with another new form that really led me in the direction where I needed to go. And so I found out basically that it is an organ. And what I did is I found a plastic heart on the internet. They sell them. And I noticed that the apex, the bottom of the form, there are three edges, and the Chestahedron has these three edges. Now I was really excited. So then I followed the edges up to about a third of the way up from the apex, which is the bottom, the point, and they disappeared. But yet at the top, the 3 points reappeared. Oh my gosh, I knew I had it. This was the Chestahedron, because that's exactly what the Chestahedron does, except that at the end of these three edges, there are triangles in the Chestahedron. So it's so interesting that when the heart beats, where the triangles meet these edges is where it expands. And when it expands at that point, it moves, the heart moves in three directions at the same time on the outside, on the periphery. And that's exactly what the heart does. So there's a bunch of things like this that's just been just overwhelming to me.
Do you find it do you think it's some sort of cosmic giggle or something, a hint from the universe or something like that, that you discovered this shape and it's effectively related to the heart, which sits in the chest, and your last name is Chest, and it's called the Chestahedron? Is that just a pure coincidence, or is there something else there, do you think?
No, there's something else there because you see, I had two brothers. They both died of heart failure at birth. I almost died of a heart problem. My mother was a nurse. My dad worked on the first heart lung machine in the world. And yeah, and this form is a chest form. It's in the middle of the chest on one side. And so yeah, there's something there that there really is. And um, it's an important thing to consider.
It's extremely interesting. I thought it was more related because I heard the name of the shape before, and its relation to the heart, and I was thinking, oh, okay, so it's the heart, the chest, and then it was your name and everything like that, and people can go, oh, okay, well, he named it after his name, but again, it all fits together in this very
Yeah,
beautiful way.
yeah, it does. It does. It's not a coincidence. Okay, it's just not.
Right. So I don't mean to put you on the spot or anything like that, but would you have one near you that you could maybe show to people what it looks like? Because I find it fascinating too that when you do this, when you like you said, you inverted it when you were thinking about it in the air format, and then you relate that to the heart. I've seen pictures of people placing this within water at the degree that it actually is tilted in the chest and spinning it, and it actually perfectly makes a vortex from the apex of the water to the heart, exactly the way the air, ventricles in the heart pump the water, sorry, pump the blood through the heart as well. So it's just as fascinating. You sort of discovered this, blown it up in the way that you did, placed it at that degree, and then within the sort of contract that we're in as well, it functions the same way as it does when it's in our own body. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating. This is the Chestahedron here, and you can see. Okay, there it is. That's pretty good view. You can see it.
Yep.
That's the Chestahedron. But the problem is that this is the left ventricle of the human heart. The right isn't on there. The right would be here, but this is the Chestahedron. But the problem is that this isn't really geometry. Okay, so the geometry of this shape. Okay, I'm going to show you another one. Here it is here in plastic. You can see it. That's the Chestahedron. Okay. All right. But the geometry of the Chestahedron looks like this. See, because geometry, has all straight lines. There's no curves. See that? Look, there's a triangle at the top. There's three triangles around the outside, and then there's three kites, little kite shapes there. So this is the apex where my fingers are, which is the bottom of the heart, and the top of the heart is called the base. All right. So one of the things that this is an aerial sculpture. Okay, this is air. They call this in the sculpture world an aerial sculpture. So what I did is I spun this, and it turned into a bell. So what is going on there? So I realized that there was an internal shape because this comes from a tetrahedron that goes into a cube and spins. I was the first person to ever put a platonic form inside another platonic form and spin it. No one else has ever done that. There's all kinds of things that can be discovered based on that same process. All right, so if I spin it in the cube long enough, the very bottom of the, I'm not seeing it right here, but the very bottom, when it goes into the cube, okay, looks like this. Now, this is a stand I have, and I made it out of plastic, but that's the inside of this form. Now, how am I getting this to be so organic? how can I claim that this, okay, is this? How did I get this? How did I figure out the shape of this based on this? Because there's no curves. All right, so this is an interesting thing to realize, as I'm going to go show you how I did it. I'll be right back.
Sure.
All right, I got this one here. I also have the one that's inside. Remember I said that there was this one. Okay, but that comes from this one. So this one is inside this one. So this is the periphery. This is the outside of the human heart, and this is the inside. And between these two are muscles. And in those muscles are the secret of how the heart actually works. And the reason that no one knows this, because they've never had the seven-sided form in the world. It's never been here before. You can't get this, okay, unless you have the form. So what's really neat is that anybody wants to copy the Chestahedron, you can go right ahead, because you can't find anything else but the Chestahedron. So it's great. All right, so back to the question: how did I possibly get this shape to be organic? So what I did is I built a big one of these, okay, and I dipped this into soap, and I took it out and I blew a bubble. And right in the center of this, there is a seven-sided bubble. And here it is. Now here is the Chestahedron, all in its white lines. And inside is the bubble, which is the organic shape of the left ventricle of the human heart. That's the same shape I brought out. So what it's showing is that this is called minimum surfaces. Every geometric form is trying to become a sphere. Okay, and in a Chestahedron, that's what the sphere is trying to look like, but it can't. And so it stops at a certain point based on the edges. It's called minimum surfaces. So organs, okay, are based on minimum surfaces. And minimum surfaces are the most amount of volume that can be held, okay, with the least amount of surface. And that's what a bubble is all about. So that gives you an idea of how I possibly came up with this. So that means that inside this one, there's a Chestahedron. So here it is. There's the heart on the outside, and inside there's the geometry. There is the same geometry of both the inside and the outside of the heart. And in between those two geometries, there are muscles. So the outside of the heart, this one, okay, I've been able to make this move. I've been able to make geometry move. This is how the outside of the heart looks when it moves. Now, there's nobody, they don't know this because they haven't had this seven-sided form. It's no big deal. And the inside of the heart also moves in a way. Look at how the inside of the heart works. The inside of the heart is twisting. It's going into a vortex that's expanding and contracting vortex. This goes on at the same time as the outside expands, the inside twists. And now we know what's going on. Now I've found out how that happens in the muscles. And that process is a whole new discovery of actually what's moving the geometry in such a way to allow the blood to go in and out. Now, one of the problems that we have today is it a pump or is it not a pump? Okay, now you see this it's not a pump. It's fairly recent. You see, before people started saying that the heart is not a pump, it was based on a discovery about 300 years ago. A guy named Harvey said, the heart's a pump. And the reason he said that was because they discovered that the blood circulates in the body. So what's going to circulate isn't this thing that's beating in the heart when they have an operation. That's got to be a pump. Okay, so now they're saying, well, it's not a pump because many reasons. They have many reasons. Okay, so to me, since I have found this, okay, the form is telling me, okay, that I don't know for sure which one it is, and no one else does either yet. There's a lot of this speculation stuff going on, but I'm coming closer to what is, if it is a pump or it's not a pump, or what the heck is it? Okay, if it's not a pump, then what is it? If it isn't a pump, what is it? They don't have answers. Okay, because they don't have the form and the function together. They have the form, okay, which is physical, but they don't have the function other than just using these dissections, x-rays, MIRs, magnets, echoes. That's all they got. They're trying to see what's inside, how it works. You need geometry to help you do this, and I'm willing to help anybody. I'm not here to convince anybody that it works. I'm here just to show that this is a possibility. And so that's been very exciting for me.
Absolutely. There's so many ways I'd like to take that. That was amazing. One thing that really jumped out to me, it was, the idea of putting it into soapy water and blowing a bubble with it is just, again, you can't come to that without an artistic kind of background to a certain degree to just conceptualize. Maybe I'll just try it. It's that innovative kind of imagination of finding something like that.
That's right. Okay. Science could never find this. They can never find this. Okay, why? Because, like I said before, this was found artistically. This isn't sitting around with a math book.
So with that, then, what has it been like trying to get the word out with what this is and what it could potentially mean, and how it can really help us with our understanding of how we function here? How has it been? Have you been contacted by people who are interested in this in medical fields or in scientific fields or anything like that? Like, how has that been when you kind of present this information to them?
Well, it's like being in the desert, not having any water. You have to remember that the way that the heart has been approached, okay, has been in such a way where nobody can touch it unless you know everything about it, and you know all how to cut it in half, and on and on and on and on. And I don't know any of that. I'm just an artist, and I have discovered this, and I would love to have people tell me that it's incorrect, or it's no good, or it's stupid, or whatever. I'm waiting, but I've been waiting, almost 19 years. I found it 19 years ago, and in the meantime, I've had 3 medical doctors kind of interested. That's it. And I have 200 lectures on the YouTube. So it's not that I'm trying to hide anything. It's not I'm trying to keep things a secret. And now I have you, okay, and the viewers that you have. Who knows? There might be somebody out there. I'm 19th year that might want to question me, or to ask me, what's going on.
That's what's so fascinating by this. And I found you from Tom Cowan, who really is one of the only doctors out there who's asking especially pertinent questions at this moment in our history. But
yeah, he's one of the 3.
Right. And it's fascinating because he also talks about, he has a book called Cancer and the New Biology of Water. And he talks about, I believe, the 4th phase of water, which I guess is what they call easy water or structured water. which really is what they're, I guess, looking at with things like trees and how the water goes from the ground and is able to climb up those trees, because at a certain point, the gravity of water wouldn't allow it to go any higher. But we have trees that are much higher than this general number, right? This sort of like mathematical number, to go back to the fact that it's very scientific. But what we're finding is if you place this more structured water around an electrical charge, then it's able to flow up there because of the interaction of the negative and positive charges. Now, they're also saying that this could potentially be the way that our veins and our blood are structured, where the veins are, I believe, negative and our blood is positive. And with things like people who are having heart conditions, when they ground more and they walk their bare feet in the ground, because of the negative charge of the earth, it opens up that vein a bit more to allow the blood to flow. And this could potentially be related to what you're talking about with the is it a pump, is it a vortex kind of question? Because one of the things that I found interesting with Tom Cowan's work was he was saying, well, if you think about it in terms of like a bus station, right, and the heart's a pump, well, that would mean that the blood is able to, the engine is able to get it to the destination of, let's say, your hands or your feet, the farthest part away. But if it goes back to the pump just as fast, then how is it a pump if there's nothing at the other end to essentially pump it back? Which is where you kind of get that. I think what you're kind of getting at is one is twisting while one is sort of pulsing outward. It's this kind of interaction here, but it's fascinating that there's people such as yourself who have come across these things, and there's just no really questions about it, because it's fascinating. There's no interest in this.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with what Tom Cowan is saying. It's not my work. You see, my work is basic on a vortex. And you have to remember that you cannot have vortexes of any kind unless they're based on suction. You can't have a pressure vortex. There's no such thing. If you have a vortex and you're claiming that the heart is heliocentric, okay, then it's based on suction. It's not based on pressure. Okay, now that's the geometry part of it. Okay, so about negative and positive pressures and what the earth is doing and all this kind of stuff and so forth and so on. It's very interesting. I don't in any way think it's not something you should study or look at or consider, but the geometry, okay, of it is kind of a new approach, okay, to whether it's a pump or it's not a pump. So the thing about, to me, is that I have found that the Chestahedron is moving by the blood. The blood moves the heart. Okay, so whether it's a pump or not a pump doesn't enter into my world of this, because of the vortex. Now, when the blood enters the heart, there are two valves. Okay, there's a mitral valve and the aortic valve. Okay, so these valves have to close and they also have to open. They have to open and they have to close. So I asked these doctors, what's opening and closing those valves? What is it? Is the heart doing that, or is the blood doing that? And if it is the blood, how can it open and close when it's going in a vortex and only in a vortex? Okay, so these questions, aren't answered. All right, now, when the blood comes into the heart through the mitral valve, which is a big one, it's twice the size of the other one, which is the aortic. When it comes in clockwise. Okay, so here's the blood coming in from the atrium clockwise. Okay, and then when it leaves through the aorta, that's going counterclockwise. Why is that, fellas?
Yeah.
Why is that? Come on. Okay, my work shows why. My work shows how. Okay, so why aren't you guys jumping on this to find out what the hell happened? How did you find that out? Or can you explain it? But I don't get that. So, but I can. I do know how it works.
Is that from what you just showed us from those two forms that you just showed us, or is that a different discovery that you found through playing around with your Chestahedron?
No, it's coming. It's all of my work is based on geometry. So form has a function. Okay, form is where everybody's concentrating on form, but I have the function that comes into the form. So form has a function and function has a form. Okay, there's hardly any, I don't know anybody that's working with the function. They think they looking with the X-rays. They're cutting it open like they did in the Renaissance. They're using magnets and echoes in the stick. That's not how you're going to find this. You're just going to see the phenomena of how the blood comes in and out through an image. Okay, and imagination. We need more than imagination. We need to go from imagination to something that's more concrete or more factual. We have to kind of stay away from all this fantasy and all this peripheral thinking that everything is, fairy tales. It's a little bit more than fairy tales. It's actual working models based on lawful movement of geometry. And that's all I'm saying is, gosh, you guys, why aren't you looking at this and seeing what I'm saying? What's inside the muscles that you guys can't see? They do know that it wraps around and then comes back, but they don't understand how those myofibers, they're myocardial fibers. They don't understand how they move. I have found a model and I've made it that shows how the inside of the muscle and the outside of the muscle work. Okay, and they're at 60 degrees from each other, which all the scientists say is true. Okay, but they don't know why it's 60. Okay, and they don't know what they've done is they've cut the base off and thrown it away, and then taken this part, which is the muscle area here, and unwrapped it, and they find out there's the spiral. Yeah, I did that too. But you gotta leave the base on. You can't just take it off. Okay, and so how does the fiber that comes at 60 degrees this way and then goes down 60 degrees on the inside, what's in between? So these are other things that I found. Here, this is really neat. Here's the mid-level. This is what it looks like in the very center of the muscles. So this model, okay, is showing the inside of the heart, the outside of the heart, and what's in the middle.
Okay.
And here it is. I got models of it. It's not, I'm not making this stuff up. This is not fantasy. No, it's just not. It's real. Okay. The geometry allows it to be real.
It's fascinating to me that it's almost exactly the process that you have to kind of do is the idea of imagining something and then bringing it into physical form, which is thinking about the spirit of something and then bring it into matter, right? And it's almost like they're just, and you can call that to a certain degree cause and effect. You're thinking about what the cause might be, and then I guess conceptualizing what the effect is, where they're looking at all the effects of what something might be in the physical plane, but not conceptualizing what the cause is. Where you imagined that there was this form, we're able to see it in an artistic realm, and then now that you have it in physical form, it's the intermediary between those two that you can kind of draw all these conclusions with, like you're finding that they just don't have, because like you said, they don't have the geometry.
Yeah, this cause and effect that you just mentioned is completely true. That's right on. They're looking at the physical heart, okay? And that's what these different instruments that they're using with magnets and echoes and so forth, it's physical, okay? You've got to look beyond the physical, all right, to see that there's a structure underneath. And that structure is what I've been studying for 19 years. I've been studying for 22 years, but I didn't find the heart. It took me 3 years to find the heart. There's a lot of people. Okay, first off, most of the work that's done on the heart is done with the brain. Okay. So the brain is very important. Okay. But what is left out most of the time is the part of the feeling life. There's the physical, the earthbound, and then there is the feeling life, which is where the heart is. It's in the center of the thorax. Okay, that's where the feeling is taken care of. So they say, well, the heart is warm. The heart isn't warm. It's a muscle. It's not warm. The blood is warm. The blood is what gives the warmth to the human body. The center of the warmth is in the heart. That's where the biggest amount of blood is. Okay, and then there's all this kind of stuff about that the heart is affecting the pineal gland, or it's affecting the way a scab, you know, is in the process of healing a cut, or it's the heart is a certain kind of thinking, and so forth. This is just so much, whatever you want to call it. It's the blood that's affecting all these things, not the heart. The heart is an organ that sits in the middle of the body that the blood runs through. The blood runs through the heart. Okay. And that's what the heart is for, is to help the blood flow through the body. Slow it down a little bit, twist it to this direction, open, close the valves, make the aorta turn to the right. And I told Dr. Cowan that one of the reasons that you can't say that the blood is being pressured out of the heart is because of a fire hose, and you run the hose and fill it with water, and under pressure it goes straight. How come it turns right? Well, he has said that it turns right because it's based on suction. But he doesn't go enough to ask me enough questions that the reason that it turns right is because it is turning a vortex in the right direction. And that if you turn a vortex right or left, it turns corners. It doesn't go straight. It turns into an arc, either to the left side arc, the right side arc. That's more of the clue that I understand how the blood runs through the heart, and it leaves through the aorta, and it leaves in the opposite direction as it enters the heart. They can't explain it. Why? How come I can explain it? How come? Because I have been studying the function, okay, of what's going on inside the heart. Anyway, that's why I think most people leave me alone, because it's hard to believe that a guy like me would ever find such things or make such statements, because I have no medical background and I don't want one. I mean, I don't want to be a doctor, but I'm just explaining and telling things that I understand through geometry. I did study, though. My wife was getting a doctorate degree. She went to the University of California in San Francisco Medical School and got a library card. I took that library card and I used it for 1 year. I checked out every book that had any geometry or any image research, and I studied them. I brought in one of those dollies, and I used to put the books on dollies because I checked out so many, and I would wheel the books home and start studying these. I did this for 1 year. So I do understand a lot about the heart, but not like a doctor, of course. But I do understand something now that I didn't understand before about geometry. The heart taught me about geometry, and the geometry taught the heart. And it all was artistic.
That's what's so beautiful about it. And it's almost the fascinating thing to me, honestly, sort of seeing your work too, is the importance of asking questions, but asking the right questions or really great questions. Because like you said, if you're studying all these things, like the books you kind of checked out, but if they're using it in a wrong conceptualization, I mean, it's good to understand where we were and what we think we understand about certain topics. But if the fundamental question or something like that is wrong, then we have to look to something that's more in our, I guess, the imagination or like the spirit aspect of who we are and what we are when we're in this kind of physical plane that we're in, to then bring these kind of answers like you've found through, again, an artistic kind of side of things, and not this analytical or scientific or with numbers and inches and centimeters and stuff like that, and more just discovering it from the pure imagination, almost like a child.
Oh yeah, it's playful. Okay. I've always been playful with these things. I'm not afraid of them or to look at the heart. I just play with it, although I've never seen a real heart. I've never touched one, never seen one, whatever. I don't need to see one. But I'll tell you one really neat thing that really shows a lot about why I think this discovery is valid. Okay, so in the process of studying these doctors and their researches, the cardiologists, that they took pictures of the heart with x-rays from the front of the body, from the side of the body, and from the top of the body. So they had 3 views, front, top, and side of the heart. And they concluded that the heart sits in the body at 45 degrees. 45 degrees. Okay, so, and it does. If you look at these 3 views, they're 45 degrees, no dispute. Okay, but the heart, okay, is 3-dimensional. The heart is not 2-dimensional. If you just look at the front, okay, then not look at the side, that's 2-dimensional. So this is what they came up with. And there is the heart, and the front, the side, and the top. So this is the side, this is the front, and that's the top. Hope you can see that. But I put a red line on the drawing to show that's 45 degrees. Okay. So I then took those same x-rays. Okay. So here's this is the side, this is the other side, and this is the top. And sure enough, let's see, here's the top. That's the front, and this is the side. Okay. So the heart, okay, is not a 2-dimensional image. It's a 3-dimensional image. It is 3-dimensional. Okay. So they never got this far. They never got this far. Okay. So what's amazing about this is that to get all of these angles right 3-dimensionally, you have to run those lines correctly. So there's the lines correctly for the side, for the front. See how the lines are correctly, and the top. So yeah. The Chestahedron, okay, the heart sits in the body, okay, at root 3. This is root 3. So I'm going to put it in there. There it is. And it sits in the body at root 3. So here's your 45, here's your 45, and here's your 45.
Could you just go a bit higher?
I'm sorry.
Yep. Perfect.
There's your 45 there. There's your 45 there. And there's your 45 there. You're going right along with the x-rays. All right, so to show you this, is really important. So here's the one without anything but the root 3. That is root 3. Now to show you what root 3 is 2-dimensionally, this won't be too long. Okay, if you take a circle and you find the center of the circle, and you spread that circle out, so those center points are on the periphery.
Just want to see if, sorry, I just want to see if I cover off my screen here, if they can see it a bit better. Maybe not. Sorry.
Well, anyway, if you spread these circles out until the center touches the periphery and the center of the other one touches the periphery of the other circle, okay, that's really important. So if you make sure that that is the same size as your cube, that's the same size. I'll take the lid off and show you. It might be even easier to see. See that distance there?
Yep.
Okay. That's the size of 1. And this is the size of root 3. So root 3 is exactly in the middle of 2 peripheral circles. These 2 circles are cell division. This is the cell division. And when it divides exactly into 3 spaces exactly equal. And this distance is root 3. So in this root 3 is the foundation of the human direction of the human heart. It sits at root 3. And root 3 is exactly in the middle of 2 circles. And why that's important is because this is the balance, okay, in the human body that we now have. We go through the world directly through root 3, and root 3 is the balance between forward and backwards, right and left, and top to bottom. That's the balance. So all of these peripheral things, it's a pump, it's not a pump. That's all peripheral center. That is known today basically as polarities. The heart is not based on polarities. It's based on a 3-dimensional root 3. And the balances of those 3 directions, the heart is not about. So the heart is suffering. The heart is suffering right now because there's so many polarities in our world. And that's what's basically leading to heart congestion, is because we're not approaching it in a balanced way. We're on one side or the other. This shows that the human heart, okay, is a balancing organ. It's not a pump. It's about a balancing of our emotional life, our life here on earth that takes place in our feeling life. Okay, and the reason is because of root 3. Root 2, which is polarities, okay, is based on brain thinking. Root 3 is based on heart thinking, and that's what we need to do now. And to try to stop from going from one side to the other, believing one side is wrong and one side is right. That's not what the heart wants to do. The heart wants to be a balanced 3-dimensionally, and any polarity is not 3-dimensionally, it's 2. I know that's a lot, but the reason that I want you to I wanted to tell you this is because the heart, as a pump or not a part, is a wrong direction that we don't need to go to. It's not about pumping or not pumping, please.
Right. It's almost like there's just too much potentially ego involved in terms of, oh, well, I found out that it's not a pump and now we can go down this route and my name's attached to it, blah, 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 where you're just basically saying like, whatever it is, this is how it functions. And it's telling us something. And what you've been able to do is speak the language of that through your geometry to go, this is what it's telling us. Look at how perfect this is. If you get a circle and you pull it apart, so you get essentially a Vescopisces, right? If you do the root 3 is within that, which is within the heart and how it sits in your chest. And it's just explaining, I find too, a lot of the religious symbols, that's what they're trying to tell you too. Almost all the preservers, right? You have the creator, destroyer, and the preserver in so many different religions. And they're usually always depicted right in the middle of that Vescopisces, which is what you just showed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for explaining that. That's exactly correct. Exactly. And that's not based on fantasy. It's not based on fairy tales. Okay. It's based on geometry, which is the lawful mathematics behind 3-dimensional forms.
I can't thank you enough for the work that you've done and being able to kind of show this and express this, because, and again, the fascinating part about that too is it's also balanced around the number of seven. And I was wondering if that interests you at all, with specifically that number of seven and how that's the balance point in a lot of different theological texts as well. And if there was anything that you found interesting about that number specifically to kind of, tickle your brain at least a little bit.
You seem to always ask the right questions. Okay.
Good.
The number seven, it's unbelievable. I'll tell you what the seven-sided form is. It's a transitional form. It's between two polarities. It's between the cube and the octahedron. So it's between earth and air. Okay, so it takes up one of the lobes in the lungs. The heart does. Okay, so it's between these two. So that is also known as an interval. So an interval is not one or the other. It balances the two. If it goes to one side, it says, hey, wait a minute, no, I need to go back a little bit this way to this side. And this is what the seven does. Okay, and the seven is, it's rational. It's asymmetrical. It doesn't fit into exactly one half and the other half being exactly equal, whatever. It can. Okay. I mean, you could try, but the thing is that it is an interval. So the interval is between red and blue. It's between the red blood and the blue blood. And that's where those two come together. Okay. They don't, this isn't one, the left ventricle and the right ventricle are so connected to each other, although the bloods don't touch, but except they do in the embryo, which is interesting. But anyway, so the seven itself, okay, is so interesting, and it's used in the world many ways. The number seven is used more in the Bible than any other number. It's also found in the Quran. I mean, it's just everywhere. The seven is everywhere, but there's never been a form. There's never been any artistic approach to this problem. So yeah, the heart is an interval. It's between two polarities. It's at root 3. It's in a cube, which is the symbol of the earth, although the cube's not there anymore, of course, it's gone. I mean, but that's basically the basic structure, the function behind the form. Now, the seven is a wonderful thing to have. Why no one else approached it, I don't know.
Well, it's definitely a miracle that you did and you were able to find what you found. And, it's really fascinating too that I heard in one of you did an interview with Simulation. It was just a YouTube channel. I can't remember the gentleman's name off the top of my head, but it was a fascinating interview where you're showing this, and really the seed of life, to go back to the seven, is what they're talking about. I believe the seed of life or the flower of life. I'm not entirely sure which one it is, but you have the one circle like you showed, and if you draw 6 around it, again, the 6 around 7, that's when you start getting these shapes too. When you connect those with the you see the Star of David out of that. You see all of these different religious symbols that they're trying to tell you, but we're fighting over the polarities between the two and not going, like, we're not looking at the entire thing here.
Right. Here's the Chestahedron in the flower of life. And you can see that it's centered around 6, and there's a circle in the middle, which is 7. This is 7 in the flower of life. Also in the seed of life. It's an amazing, and the distance between here and the center is different than from the top to the bottom to the center. So the distance from here to the center is different. Oh my gosh, what is going on there? Well, what I found out is if I put a sphere around this one, it touches here, and it touches this copper shield. If I put the same size sphere around this, these 3 points touch the sphere, and so forth. It's exactly in the middle of a sphere. That's why it's different in size.
Mhm.
And I didn't do this. I just put it in there. How could anybody possibly invent something? This is not an invention. This is a discovery. I'm not smart enough to invent something like this. There's no way I could do this. All I can do is find it. I can find things, but I can't make them like this out of my mind. This is something that's been around. It's just not been seen.
What's fascinating to me with a lot of these conversations is, and I find that maybe the reason why we're not encouraged with things like the classical liberal arts, right, of the trivium, the quadrivium, learning these things is once you realize that there are essentially there is a structure here, there is a way that this thing operates, like you're saying, in terms of like that wasn't a, you didn't invent something, it was discovered, but it has to operate in certain forms in this physical plane that we're in. And this is what I believe. I don't know how you feel about this, but it kind of relates to the old esoteric ideas of squaring the circle, which is also related to the sphere and the cube and how they're so intricately connected. And what you just showed is essentially that it's you're with putting the sphere around that, it's you can't escape these things. And for me, it just seems like yeah.
You can't. You can't make them up, and you can't fake it. You can't. Either it works or it doesn't work. Period.
And I'm wondering, like, I just find that some of the polarities that we're seeing nowadays, especially in the younger generations that I kind of inhabit right now, in so much division with everything, it just seems like we're not being told a lot of these kind of things like you've discovered here. And what I've really come across with sacred geometry in the quadrivium and all these different things is there is structure here, there is order. And it's when we go outside of that order is when we get burned, is when we, stop to have the great symmetry and the great, symbiosis of nature and life around us, because we're operating within those rules and confines. But when we aren't told that the confines are there and we say we can do whatever we want and truth is relative and all those kind of things, that's when we start getting out of harmony and disharmony and the heart disease and all these kind of things.
And this is my big hope for young people like you. And you're not going to stand for this.
Well, that's half the reason why
Not going to be. Listen, all this authority stuff, and all this that you have to, bow down to doctors or bow down to politicians or bow down whatever. That's a bunch of bull. Don't do it. They're trying to rob you of what you have inside as young people, and that youth must be kept.
that creativity.
This is exactly what you're doing here with this podcast, is this kind of thing. The future is podcast. I think that everybody someday is going to have their own podcast. So there's just every person has a podcast, you know what I mean? But not now. Right now, it's just a few innovators.
Well, Frank, I can't thank you enough for what you've done and for taking the time here. And for me, one of the things I usually like to ask people in this kind of regard, and I think this is perfect for what we're kind of talking about here, is with everything going on in the world and exactly what you've done with cultivating your creativity to discover something like this that's so groundbreaking. If people do feel this kind of jackboot on their neck or something like that with what you're talking about with the politicians and with doctors and media and all that stuff, what would you say, or how would you inspire someone at this time to empower themselves to find courage and bravery?
Well, there's a process that I've found and I used and other people have used. Is the first thing that when we're born, we learn everything through imitation. We imitate our mother, the way she walks, the way she moves. Everything's done through imitation, which is the fantastic way to learn. Okay, by the time the person is probably around 12, 11, 12, 13, somewhere around in that age, they start to get very conservative. And before that, their second dimension paintings that they do are fantastic. But when they reach that age, they go into the third dimension and they start to draw rocket ships, people, heads, and so forth and so on, which they didn't do that before. Okay, and in that period, the human being becomes very, very conservative. Okay. So the only way out of that they have found of people like artists is they start to innovate. So innovation is nothing but a higher form of imitation. 90% or more of the art that's in the world right now, and I mean modern art or whatever art, is innovating. And innovating is still copying. It's still copying at a higher form. For instance, before imitating, okay, would be a line drawing of a duck. Okay, and then when we imitate, um, we see that the person next to us has the same drawing, so and they paint it with the crayons blue, and so you paint yours blue. That's imitation. Innovation is making your copy green, and that's it. It's still the same duck, the same line, same drawing, change the color. And that's basically what the arts are in right now. They're in a change from imitating to innovation. Okay, the next step that we have to take in our innovation to move beyond innovation is imagination. You have to imagine an image that you haven't seen. Okay, you can't just paint apples or oranges. You have to start to find out what's behind the oranges, what's behind the shadows, what's behind on and on and on, which is more imagination. Now, once you're into imagination and you have an image that you've imagined, you can become inspired. Now, inspiration, okay, is the real gateway into what we really need to do, and that is we need to get to a point where we can intuition can come in. Now, intuition is not just a female thing, it's a male thing too. It's not based on hurricanes and stuff like crazy chaos and stuff. Innovation is that coming in where you allow something to enter you that isn't normally seen, that comes through being inspired. And you can't have innovation without being inspired. So a lot of people think between inspiring and intuition is insight. You have to have some kind of insight. And then that insight can lead to the highest form, which is innovation. So that process I went through. So my work is coming from a source that isn't found in books. It's not found in lectures. Okay, it's found in you. And one of the first ways to get out of this is stop imitating and innovating and get out of these polarities, because the polarities is holding you back. It's hurting you. I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of what a process I go through.
No, that's beautiful, Frank. I think that's something that people really need to hear right now, and I think it's so true in terms of things that we're realizing now, and a lot of the ways that we're going in the world now. There's no textbooks, there's nothing. We're entering places now that there isn't really a reference point, and I think it's beautiful in terms of taking the inspiration that kind of people can see from what you have done to find those innovations and that inspiration and the intuition to have those direct downloads to find these things that you're talking about.
All right, so let me tell you the final part of that is that after you have the innovation, okay, you have to go back to imitating. Because in the imitation, okay, and the innovation, there are many, many sources that help intuition. It helps you understand it. It helps to have some kind of order, okay, to bring back your innovation to establish it in such a way that it's not fairy tales. So to get away from the fairy tales, you have to make a complete circuit. So you have to go back to the blue blood and back to the oxygen again.
And the cycle continues and never ends, the alpha and omega.
No, let's hope it never ends. my gosh, you see what happens when it never ends is what's going on now in our world with all this polarity stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Frank,
Yeah.
I can't thank you enough for your time. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I hope people did too. And it really shows how much is connected with you're using your creativity to bring stuff into this world. And I think that's fantastic. So if everyone did enjoy this, I hope you can please drop a comment, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. I hope that we can potentially bring you back on here, Frank. I really enjoyed this, and hopefully people did. We can bring you back on to dive into these topics a bit more, because I love the esotericness of merging what you've done to certain things like the drawings of old, the tales of old, the theologies, and trying to talk about what they actually, how they relate to your work and everything like that. And it's just fantastic. So I can't thank you enough for your time and being so kind with that. And hopefully we'll have you back on here. And yeah, I'll maybe give you the last word.
Yeah, I'll be glad to come back again, and just keep your feet on the ground, but your head in the air.
Love it. Thank you so much, Frank. Everyone else, we'll see you on the next one.
Okay. Thank you. Nice meeting you.
You too.
Bye.